It's June of 2026, and the country is already in the fight of its life. The primaries are tearing through one state after another. The maps are being redrawn by force, and the blind woman from a village in the Balkans, dead for 30 years, is the one who told us this month was coming. I know how that sounds. Stay with me anyway, because what she described decades before any of us were paying attention is no longer a prophecy waiting to happen. It's the headline you scrolled past this morning. A country splitting down the middle. Cities on edge. People who used to be neighbors now treating each other like enemies. She saw all of it. And the part that should make the hair stand up on your arms is that the things she got right were never the easy ones. If you want to understand what's actually coming, not the comfortable version, the real one, don't leave before the end. Some of this you'll recognize the second I say it. She was born Vangelia Pandiva Dimitrova on the last day of January 1911 in a town called Strumica. An ordinary girl until she was 12. Then a storm took her. The story goes that a sudden, violent wind lifted her off the ground and carried her, and when they found her, her eyes were packed with dirt and dust. She survived, but she never saw the world again the way you and I do. From that darkness, she said, something else opened. For the rest of her life, leaders came to her door. Generals, politicians, men who ran countries arrived in unmarked cars to sit in front of a peasant woman who couldn't read a single line of a newspaper. They came because the things she said kept coming true. She died in August of 1996. The visions didn't die with her. They're still being read, argued over, and this is the uncomfortable part, checked off one by one. Let me start with the one that hits closest to home. She spoke of a great nation in the West, the most powerful on earth, that would begin to tear itself apart from the inside. Not invaded, not conquered, broken by its own people. She described a society where the divisions ran so deep that the country would struggle to govern itself at all, where every side believed the other was the threat, where trust collapsed, and where the streets filled with people who no longer believed the system worked for them. Now look at where we are. Right now, this month, the primaries are deciding who fights for control of Congress in the fall, district by district, in a redistricting war so brutal that maps are being torn up and redrawn in the middle of the decade. States suing states. Courts throwing out maps before a single vote is counted. A nation where roughly half the people are convinced the other half is destroying everything they love. She said the great nation would be tested not by an enemy abroad, but by the enemy of its own anger. Tell me she was wrong. This is exactly why so many people feel the ground shifting and can't name what they're feeling. The pattern she described is unfolding in plain sight, and most of us are too busy fighting each other to notice. That's the reason I put together something for everyone who follows this channel. A digital book that lays out, plainly, the prophecies that map onto what we're living through right now. It's free, it's in the first pinned comment, and there are only so many copies before the link comes down. Grab it before you forget, because the political fracture was only the beginning of what she saw. She warned of an economic reckoning unlike anything in living memory. Not a recession that comes and goes. A grinding, structural crisis where the cost of simply living becomes the thing that breaks people. Where a paycheck that used to cover a life now barely covers a month. She said the price of bread, of rent, of keeping a roof overhead would climb until ordinary families had to choose what to give up. And she said that when enough people can't afford to live, the anger doesn't stay quiet. It moves into the streets. You already know this one is happening. Affordability is the word every politician is suddenly shouting, because they can feel it too. The slow squeeze that no amount of spin can hide. She didn't predict a stock market number. She predicted the feeling. The exhaustion of working harder every year and falling further behind. That's the crisis, she said, would shake the foundations. And foundations, once they crack, don't crack quietly. Then she turned to the lands where the oldest prophecies were written. She spoke of fire in the desert that refuses to go out. A war in the Middle East that would flare, fall silent, and flare again, never ending, never truly resolved. She said the most powerful nations on earth would be pulled into it one by one, unable to stay out, each one certain that this round would finally be the last. Watch what's actually happening. Israel and Iran traded blows that dragged in the most powerful military on the planet, bombs falling on nuclear sites buried deep in the rock, and then a pause. Not peace, a pause. The inspectors locked out, the stockpiles unaccounted for. Commanders on both sides already drawing the next strike, already warning their leaders the quiet won't hold. She said the fire in that region would be the match, not the blaze, that what burns there never stays there. And every time the world tells itself it's finally over, she warned, it's only catching its breath before the next round. There's another one I almost left out, because it's too close. She spoke of sickness moving through the world again. A new illness, spreading faster than the systems built to stop it, somewhere in this stretch of years, 2026, 2027. Hospitals filling, borders tightening. That reflex of fear we all swore we'd never feel again, returning. She didn't describe it as the end of the world. She described it as something worse in a way, a world that already lived through one of these and is too tired, too divided, and too suspicious to face the next one together. Think about how that plays out now. The trust is gone. The patience is gone. If a new outbreak arrived tomorrow, we wouldn't respond as one people. We'd respond as a dozen warring camps, each accusing the other. That fracture, the one she described in The Great Nation, is exactly what would turn a manageable crisis into a catastrophe. And she saw the hunger coming with it. She warned of empty shelves and empty fields. Not in some distant century, soon, in the years we are standing in right now. She said the rains would come wrong. Too much in the places that couldn't hold it, too little in the places that needed it. Floods drowning the harvest in one country while drought cracked the soil in the next. And she said the food would stop moving, that the long chains carrying grain and bread across the oceans would snap, and that millions would relearn what their grandparents already knew, that hunger is never more than one bad season away. We're already watching the weather turn strange and violent, the floods arriving where they shouldn't, the crops failing in places that once fed the world. She said the richest would feel it as higher prices at the store. The poorest would feel it as starvation. And she warned that a hungry world is a dangerous world, that empty stomachs have started more wars than any flag or ideology ever did. Which brings me to the wars she saw. Not one apocalyptic blast that ends everything, but the smaller, uglier truth, conflict over what's running out. She said nations would fight over water, over the rivers that cross borders, the aquifers running dry beneath the desert, the basic things we've always assumed would simply be there. Right now, there are more wars burning on this planet than at any time since the Second World War. 1 in 7 people on Earth lives under the shadow of armed conflict. She said it would be like this. Not a single great war announced on the news, but dozens of smaller ones bleeding into each other, all of them, underneath, a fight over what's left. Now here's the prediction that, when I first read it, stopped me cold, because it's the one she had no business getting right. She spoke of a thinking thing that men would build, machines that could reason, that could speak, that would grow so powerful that humanity would lose its grip on what it created. She said we would hand our decisions to these creations, trusting them, leaning on them, and that this is precisely how we would lose control, not in a war against the machines, in a slow surrender, where we stop thinking for ourselves because something else does it faster. A blind woman in a Balkan village, decades before a smartphone existed, describing a mind that isn't human, that we'd build with our own hands, that we'd come to trust more than each other. And look around. We already asked the machine before we ask a person. She didn't warn that it would attack us. She warned that we'd give ourselves away to it willingly and call it progress. That's the part that should keep you awake. And the same machines that think for us, she said, would also watch us. She spoke of a time when there would be eyes everywhere, when nothing a person did, said, or even searched for in private would stay private, when the walls would listen and the devices would remember. She didn't describe a prison with bars. She described something worse, a world where people police themselves because they can never be certain they're not being watched. Look at what we carry in our pockets, what we let into our homes that sits quietly, listening for its own name. What every government and every company now knows about where we go and what we want before we even decide. She said the loss of freedom in our age wouldn't be seized by force. It would be handed over for convenience, traded away one small permission at a time, until the day people finally realize there's nowhere left the eyes can't reach. And by then, she warned, it's already too late to take it back. Before I go on, I'll say it once more. The book is in the first pinned comment, free, and it ties every one of these threads back to what scripture and history have been pointing at for centuries. The link won't stay up long. She also warned about something we're doing to the sky. She said men would try to take control of the weather itself, to bend the climate to their will, and that in doing so, they would unleash disasters they never intended. Storms that don't behave, droughts that won't break, floods where there were never floods. We're already running the experiments she described, seeding clouds, reflecting sunlight, treating the atmosphere like a machine we can adjust. She said the arrogance of believing we could control nature would be punished by nature, and that the poorest people, the ones with no technology and no defense, would pay first and pay most. That's the thread running through everything she saw. If you look closely, the water that runs out, the harvests that fail, the heat in places that were never hot, the cold in places that were never cold. She said the wealthy nations would try to engineer their way out of it and leave everyone else behind, and that the resentment this breeds would itself become a source of war. Scarcity doesn't just kill, it divides, and division, as she kept warning, is the real weapon. Then there is the war happening in Europe right now that no one has declared. She saw it, a conflict fought in the dark, with no front line and no uniform. She said the great powers would learn to strike each other without firing a single shot. Cables cut on the ocean floor. Power grids going dark for reasons no one can quite explain. Lies spreading faster than the truth, turning populations against their own governments. Machines drifting over airports and military bases, and no one able to say for certain whose they are. That's not a forecast anymore. That's the news coming out of Europe. The sabotage, the severed undersea cables, the airports shut down by drones no one will claim. She said this is how the next great war would begin, not with a declaration, but with 1,000 deniable acts, until one day a nation finally says enough, and there's no walking it back. The most dangerous wars, she warned, are the ones that have already started before anyone is willing to admit they're at war. And then she saw the ground itself turn against us. A great wave rising out of the sea without warning, swallowing a coastline crowded with people who never had time to run. The earth splitting open in places that believed they were safe. She said the planet would shake off its stillness, and that the coasts where we built our biggest cities were never as solid as we told ourselves. The scientists say the same thing in colder words, that the fault lines are loaded, that the great quake is overdue, that a wall of water reaching a populated shore is not a question of if, but when. She simply said it first, and without the instruments. When the earth moves, she said, it doesn't negotiate, and all our walls and warning systems buy us minutes, not safety. And then there is the figure she described, the one I want you to sit with. She spoke of a man who would rise in a time of chaos. Charismatic, magnetic, a voice that promises to pull the fractured world back together, to end the conflict, to fix what everyone else broke. She said people would follow him because they'd be desperate for someone to follow. And she warned, this is the exact warning, that the one who promises to unite everything is the one to fear the most. That the cure offered in the moment of greatest panic is sometimes the thing that finishes you. She didn't give a name. She never does. But she described the conditions perfectly. A world so tired of fighting, so frightened, so broke and so divided, that it would hand its freedom to anyone who promised peace. And she said that handover would happen not by force, but by relief, by exhaustion, by people choosing it. That's what makes her different from every doomsday voice you've ever rolled your eyes at. She didn't predict the asteroid or the alien fleet. She predicted us. Our anger, our fatigue, our willingness to trade the hard thing for the easy lie. Every single one of these, the divided nation, the empty shelves, the fire in the desert, the eyes that never close, the man who promises to fix it all, circles back to the same root. A humanity divided against itself, exhausted, afraid, and ripe for someone or something to step in and take the wheel. So this month, while you watch the maps get redrawn and the cities tense up and the prices climb and the machine answer your questions before your own mind can, understand what you're actually looking at. You're not looking at random chaos. You're looking at a pattern. One a blind woman traced out before any of us were born. She said the hardest years would be the ones where everything happened at once, where the politics and the money and the sickness and the wars and the machines all arrived together, and the world had to decide, under pressure, exhausted, afraid, who it would become. She didn't say it to frighten people. She said it so that when the moment came, a few of us would recognize it for what it was and not be swept along with everyone else. That moment isn't 100 years away. By our count, we're standing inside it right now. If this opened your eyes even a little, stay on this channel. This is where we go past the headlines and trace what's really moving underneath them. Subscribe so the next piece finds you, because the things she saw aren't slowing down, and neither are we. Watch the video coming up on your screen next. There's more here than you think.